Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Oscar entered my wife Patricia's life through a mutual friend, and soon a connection formed between them. They began spending more and more time together, regularly meeting. I never saw Oscar as a real threat. He was always polite and sociable, but beneath the surface there was an elusive tension. In situations involving infidelity, especially when it concerns another man's wife, a certain caution is always required. While I was busy with work or away from home, they continued their secret meetings, caught up in the excitement of it all. However, despite all the thrill, something was missing, as they later confessed to me. One cold winter night became a turning point. Patricia invited Oscar over under the pretense of a casual evening with card games after dinner. He arrived around 7 in the evening, and Patricia greeted him with an embrace that seemed warm and sincere. At first, the embrace didn't alarm me. After all, they were friends. We settled in the living room, and I offered to get Oscar a beer from the kitchen. When I returned, what I saw deeply troubled me. They were sitting close together, holding hands, with Patricia's hand resting on his thigh. I couldn't hide my confusion and blurted out, "What's going on here?" Their faces tensed, as if they were preparing to tell me something that would shake me to the core. Patricia spoke first, her voice steady. "Darling, we need to talk, but please sit down." Despite the growing sense of unease, I sat down, bracing myself for what was to come. "Oscar and we've been close for 6 months," she began. "There's a connection between us that we couldn't ignore. One thing led to another." Her tone was calm, as if she was discussing something entirely reasonable. "I still care about you," she continued. "I never wanted to hurt you. That's why we've come up with a way that could work for all of us." At that moment, Oscar took over. "We can't just stop," he said, emotionless. "The chemistry between us is undeniable, but we don't want to exclude you from this. Our plan is to keep being together, but we want you to be involved too. You can watch and maybe sometimes even participate." He smiled, as if what he was proposing was completely logical. Patricia picked up on his idea. "This could even be enjoyable for you," she added with a smile. "I know what you look at online. I've seen the websites you visit." She seemed amused by my discomfort. "I checked your browser history. You're always searching for things like this on adult sites. So I thought this might interest you more than you're willing to admit." Her confidence was startling. "It might even improve our marriage," she suggested. Oscar pointed to some documents Patricia had pulled out of her bag. "All we're asking is that you sign this agreement. The terms are clearly laid out," he said as she placed the papers in front of me. The conditions were detailed: kisses, embraces, shared showers, or sleep. My head was spinning, my mouth dry, and I could barely speak. Patricia kept insisting, "I love you, but I also love Oscar. What he gives me is something I can't easily let go of. It's not about replacing you, it's just different." Oscar nodded, affirming her words. "Just sign the papers," she urged. "This is how things are now." I felt completely lost. Divorce wasn't what I wanted, but how could I agree to watch my wife with another man? As I looked at them, still holding hands, Patricia interrupted my thoughts with one final blow. "Maybe this will help you make your decision." She leaned in and kissed Oscar, pulling him closer. He responded, gently touching her cheek. I froze, watching as my wife passionately kissed another man right in front of me. Amid the shock, something stirred within me, a feeling I desperately tried to suppress but couldn't hide. Oscar noticed it first, his smile widening. "See?" he said with a smirk. "You like it." Patricia handed me the pen. The documents lay before me, the pen in my hand, and I hesitated, unsure if signing was the right thing to do. I exhaled heavily, feeling utterly confused and disoriented. I've encountered many cases of infidelity, but they were always part of my job. As a private detective running a security firm, I was used to divorce investigations taking up a large portion of my work. Looking back, I realize I didn't pay enough attention to the signs in my own life. When everything started to fall apart, I instinctively switched into professional mode. Clearly, they didn't see that coming. Calmly, I pulled out my small recorder and pressed the button. I wanted to ensure that every word of our conversation was recorded, just in case any disputes arose later. "I hope you both understand how serious this is," I began. "These discussions carry significant legal weight." My eyes skimmed over the documents lying in front of me. They were already signed and notarized. "I see you've both taken care of your part," I added. Oscar, as casual as ever, responded, "Yeah, we wanted to speed things up. We knew you'd agree eventually." He smirked. "Our notary, Geraldine, will be here soon to finalize your part. Then we can wrap this up." His enthusiasm reminded me of a child eagerly waiting to open birthday presents. I paused and asked the question that had been bothering me for a long time. "For the record, how long has this been going on behind my back?" The full reality of the situation hit me as Patricia's voice trembled in response. "Well, we've been married for 20 years, but for the past 4, I've been with Oscar." "But please, don't say it like that." She immediately became defensive. "Oscar is my soulmate. What we have is real, not what you're thinking." It was astonishing how far this had gone, and I hadn't noticed a thing. My irritation started to build. "So, this is how it is?" I muttered under my breath. "Don't act so righteous, Oliver," she snapped. "There's enough love to go around." I looked at them both, and it finally hit me that the marriage I thought was real had been nothing but a facade. Quietly, I picked up the pen, signed the document, and stood up. "I hope this makes you both happy," I said, handing over the papers. But instead of passing them over neatly, I scrawled across the page, "Not a chance." Patricia's eyes widened in shock when she saw what I had done. "What the hell are you doing, Oliver?" she yelled. I shrugged, my voice turning icy. "I don't share," I said dryly. My gaze shifted to Oscar, who stood there stunned. I grabbed a bottle of beer, took a slow sip, and then, with deliberate force, crumpled the contract and shoved it into my back pocket. Raising the bottle in their direction, I popped the cap off, spraying beer onto their smug faces. Without a word, I packed up my briefcase, laptop, and jacket, ignoring their outraged shouts, and headed for the door. Just as I was about to leave, I ran into Geraldine, the notary. She raised an eyebrow and smirked. "Looks like I showed up just in time for the fireworks," she said dryly. "You must be Oliver. Good luck with this mess," she added with a sarcastic smile. I got into my truck, reversed hard, and sped off, tearing through the front yard and crushing Patricia's beloved roses. As I pulled out onto the street, I clipped the rear of Oscar's expensive car. Yes, it was petty, I admit, but at that moment, I didn't care. At least I wasn't the one headed to the morgue. I drove straight to her parents' house, determined to take control of the situation. Although I'd always gotten along well with my in-laws, I wasn't about to let them paint me as the villain in this story. My phone buzzed with messages and calls, but soon it all went silent. When I arrived, I pressed the doorbell. After a few moments, I heard the familiar grumbling from the other side of the door. All right, I'm coming," muttered Patricia's father, Judge Michael Miller, as the porch light flicked on. He opened the door, clearly unhappy to see me at such a late hour. "Oliver, what are you doing here? And where's Patricia?" His face creased with worry. Unable to hold back, I snapped, "I have no idea where she is, probably floating on cloud 9 somewhere." Despite their daughter's flaws, her parents had always treated me with respect, but tonight there was no room for pleasantries. I handed him the crumpled contract and placed the recorder on the table. "What's this?" he asked, confused. "Just read it," I replied sharply. As he began to read the document, his expression shifted from confusion to shock. "Is this really happening?" he asked quietly, almost in a whisper. He asked a question, and I pressed the button to start recording. First, I asked if it would be okay to record the conversation to avoid any misunderstandings. As the recording played, his wife focused intently on the sounds. At some point, she loosened her grip on the robe she was holding tightly, and it slightly opened. Her hand darted to her lips, as if trying to stifle a gasp. The robe slid down further, revealing a black nightgown, elegant in its design. I couldn't help but think that his night had just gotten a lot worse. When the recording ended, he looked at me with an expression of complete helplessness. There's no easy way out of this, is there? He muttered, his voice heavy with resignation. What would you do in my place? His gaze fell, and a shiver ran through his body. I understand, son. Then, the ring of the old landline phone shattered the silence. His wife quickly grabbed the receiver. Hello? Mom? If Oliver is there, I need to talk to him right now. Her father immediately took the phone. What's going on? Is there a problem? A shout came from the other end. Dad, what are you even talking about? This doesn't concern you or Mom, she said firmly. This is between me and my husband. You need to get everything in writing, make a contract, or you'll drag everyone else into this. I could hear the voices in the background growing louder, and then there was a sudden, oh no. We know everything, her father whispered into the phone before ending the call. He turned to me, exhaling deeply. Take a break, son. Handle what needs to be done, but don't make any rash decisions, all right? Yes, sir. I'm sorry for everything, I replied quietly. Placing a firm hand on my shoulder, he said, This isn't your fault, son. Sometimes, no matter how well you tend to the garden, a snake will still find its way in. With those words, I left, got into my truck, and drove straight to the hotel where I had rented a room for the week. That evening, I was overwhelmed with rage and took it out on the minibar, smashing a few bottles before collapsing on the bathroom floor, feeling unbearably sick. Somehow, I managed to drag myself into the shower, clothes still on, and rinse off. After stripping off the wet clothes, I collapsed onto the bed and passed out. When I woke up the next morning, I still felt dazed. Realizing I didn't have any clean clothes, I called David Murphy, one of the few friends left who wasn't tied to my wife. I asked him to stop by and bring fresh clothes to room 620. David sounded concerned and asked what was going on. I promised to explain when he arrived. Oh, and grab a couple of sandwiches and some coffee. I need you to get here as soon as possible. After that, I contacted the office to arrange surveillance on my wife and her lover. I called the bank to freeze all our personal and business accounts. Then, I settled the balance on our joint credit cards and closed them. I also disconnected her phone since it was registered under my company. Finally, I arranged to have all the utilities in the house turned off. Once all that was taken care of, I got in touch with a lawyer who recommended one of the best divorce specialists. My brother's the best in the business if you want to make a real impact. Tell him I sent you, and he'll handle everything. Once everything was organized, the plan seemed straightforward. As I was wrapping up the final details, David arrived. I quickly got dressed, and we went out to grab breakfast. While I filled him in on what had happened, I was also consulting with the new lawyer about the next steps. We scheduled a meeting for 5 p.m. to discuss how to proceed. David shook his head in disbelief. I can't believe she did this. Not just the affair, but a contract too? Yeah, I sighed. But there's still more that needs to be dealt with. Take your time, man, he said, his voice full of understanding. I never liked that Oscar guy. Now I know why. If you need anything at all, Mary and I are here for you. Mary, David's wife, had always treated me like family, like a younger brother. Knowing they would stand by me in this mess gave me at least a little comfort in the middle of this storm. After he left, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the mirror. My appearance was far from perfect, although it was a slight improvement compared to the previous day. After getting dressed, I headed straight to the bank. The moment I stepped inside, I was immediately escorted to the office of the senior vice president. I wasn't a millionaire, but my personal and business accounts were substantial enough to command their full attention. As soon as I sat down, he got straight to the point. I'm not sure I understand why you're here. Yes, it's your money, and you have every right to do with it as you please, but perhaps there's something that might make you reconsider. Now, guess who worked there? That's right, Oscar, the senior financial advisor. I calmly placed the contract on the vice president's desk and turned on the voice recorder. His expression shifted from confusion to horror as he skimmed the document. But when he truly grasped the seriousness of what he was reading and hearing, his face turned a ghastly shade of white. This is some kind of joke, he muttered in a trembling voice. I assure you this is no joke, I replied, my voice steady and growing louder. I am no longer doing business with a company that employs a scoundrel who sleeps with my wife behind my back. I raised my voice so the entire office could hear. I snatched the contract from his shaking hands and took the voice recorder. I couldn't help but think about how many others had been deceived in a similar manner. Tell Oscar Garcia that he'll be receiving legal papers soon. Have a nice day. As I walked out the door, I heard the vice president scream in panic, "Get Garcia in here immediately!" I allowed myself a quiet laugh as I left the building. Next, I went to a stationery store to make 3 copies of the contract. I knew the original had to be kept safe until my lawyer had reviewed it. After that, I headed to my insurance agent's office, and as luck would have it, guess who worked there? Yes, my soon-to-be ex-wife. I was quickly ushered into the office of the company owner, Miss Victoria Lee. As I passed by, I heard someone whisper, "Oliver," but I didn't pay it any mind, just smiled politely. Miss Lee rose from behind her desk and extended her hand for a greeting, though her uncertainty was evident. "Oliver, it's nice to see you. How can we help you today?" Her voice sounded tense. I didn't waste any time. "I'm sure you know why I'm here, Victoria. I'm canceling all my policies with your company as of today. I expect a refund immediately. I can't continue doing business with a company that employs a liar and a cheat." Her eyes widened in shock, her voice hardening. "Hold on, Oliver. Your personal issues shouldn't impact your business decisions with us." I didn't respond. Instead, I threw a copy of the contract on her desk. "Do you need to listen to the recording?" I asked. She looked at the document, her eyes pausing on the notary seal and signature. I saw her tense up. Without a word, she pressed the intercom button. "Patricia, come to my office." Moments later, Patricia, my soon-to-be ex-wife, entered, visibly shaken. "Yes, Miss Lee," she muttered. Without hesitation, Victoria spoke. "You're fired. Pack your things and leave the building immediately." Patricia wobbled and then fainted with a group of employees rushing to her aid. Unfazed, Miss Lee turned back to me. "Is your decision still final?" I stood up, shook her hand, and replied, "It's a pleasure to do business with people of principle. I think I'll continue working with your company after all." With that, I stepped over my unconscious former wife and headed straight to my lawyer. Callum Sampson, my attorney, was slightly older than me, but his sharp mind and resourcefulness made him seem much younger. He invited me in, offered me a drink, and asked his secretary to bring us some water. "So, Oliver," he began with a sly glint in his eye, "I talked to my sister, and she hinted that I'd like this. What have you brought me today?" After completing the draft agreement, I reached for the recorder and turned it on. When the recording finished, he seemed more engrossed in the document I handed him than in the actual playback. As soon as the tape fell silent, he leaned towards the intercom and pressed a button. His assistant quickly entered the office. "Linda, make 2 copies of this recording and put the original in the safe," he instructed, "and bring Mr. Daniels a new tape and recorder." He continued to study the contract, occasionally giving me attentive, curious glances. When he finally put the document down, his full attention turned to me. This is genuine, isn't it? No one could fabricate something like this out of thin air." He paused for a moment, contemplating the situation. "So what do you plan to do next?" "I want to destroy them," I said, my voice calm but brimming with malice. "I want them to suffer so much that they'll never find peace, work, or a future." A slow smile spread across his face. "In all my years, I've never come across anything like this. I wouldn't walk away from this case even if I were offered a fortune. Let's start by calling in a notary to certify everything." Leaning back in his chair with confidence, he added, "I've worked with her before. She's reliable. Once everything is notarized, we'll authenticate the recording. Then we'll head straight to the jury. They won't know what hit them." I nodded. "They're already on the brink of being fired. I've caused them trouble both at work and with the bank, but I know we can finish them off. And if this case goes to trial, you'll take it pro bono?" His eyes lit up as he leaned toward me. "Of course. They have no grounds for a defamation suit. We have ironclad evidence. As long as we stick to the truth, they're powerless. At that moment, I realized there was no way out for them. They had orchestrated their own downfall. We brought in the notary, and after reviewing the situation, she confirmed it without hesitation. Their actions were a blatant attempt to manipulate the system for their own gain. My lawyer, Callum, arranged a meeting with the judge, explaining the essence of our case. The judge looked at me with understanding and determination. "I understand how important this is for you, Oliver. I'll do everything in my power to ensure justice is served. But are you sure you want the jury to hear every detail?" My lawyer intervened. "Your Honor, my client demands full justice. He wants the marriage annulled without any financial compensation to the woman who betrayed him and her accomplice." The judge agreed. "Very well. Prepare the necessary documents and we'll see if the opposing side is willing to comply." We approached them, offering the option to either sign or consult a lawyer. Their response was immediate and full of rage. Both were on the verge of financial ruin, barely able to pay their utility bills, with unemployment looming over them. She adamantly refused to sign, and he clung to the hope of a hefty payout. In desperation, they found a lawyer willing to represent their interests. But they didn't know they were walking into a trap. They hid both the contract and the recording from their lawyer. When we met in Callum's office, everything was laid out on the table. My lawyer meticulously authenticated the recording in their presence. They arrived at 9 a.m., accompanied by her father, and the tension in the room was palpable. They were filled with fear, mixed with anticipation. Patricia, always the dramatist, approached me as if she were about to embrace me. I kept my distance, standing firm. Instead, I directed a caustic remark at her former lover. Patricia began to weave a web of excuses, blaming me for their ruined lives. Both had lost their jobs and now stood on the brink of financial collapse, with no prospects for the future. In response, I handed her a waiver of claims to the house. But without money, and with their lives in shambles, the document was useless to them. After several unsuccessful attempts to sell the property, it became clear that fate was not on their side. She was increasingly desperate for my return, to her world, her bed, and especially her financial affairs. However, my lawyer did not ignore their request. He responded with a question. "Is Mr. Garcia still in your life?" Her lawyer, wasting no time, dismissed the question as irrelevant. "We're just friends," he confidently stated. But my lawyer wasn't convinced. Calmly, he pulled out a document from his stack and slid it across the table toward her lawyer. "Let's try again," he said, staring intently at Patricia while her lawyer began reading the document. "Are you still involved with Mr. Garcia?" Patricia's face turned pale, and she looked as though she might crumble under the pressure. "I don't think I can answer that," she stammered, almost whispering. "It's too personal." My lawyer remained unfazed. "Don't worry," he said in an even tone. "In court, you'll be required to answer under oath." Leaning back in my chair, I felt a growing sense of satisfaction watching their situation spiral out of control. When her lawyer finished reading the contract, he looked like he was about to be sick. "You missed this earlier," he muttered toward my lawyer. "It's just rumors. You don't have solid proof." But my lawyer was prepared. Without losing a second, he produced a signed witness statement from their notary, Geraldine Schultz, and then my notarized statement detailing all the conversations and requests. And then came the decisive blow, an audio recording. "This," my lawyer said as he played the recording, "is the proof. Your clients knew what was going on and were fully involved in it." As the recording played, the panic on her lawyer's face was obvious, and then her father, who, by the way, was a judge, could no longer stay silent. He slammed his palm on the table, glaring at the lawyer. "Enough, Patricia." Then, turning to Patricia, his voice grew firm. "Sign the papers. Stop disgracing yourself. As for Garcia, I want him gone by tomorrow evening. His name came up in the divorce case, and he'll need a lawyer before Oliver makes his ruling." His words became even sharper when he addressed Patricia directly. "You're not going to get anything out of this. If this goes to court, you'll end up with even less. Your mother and I are deeply disappointed. Your brother has already said he won't bring his family over while you're living with us. You need to find somewhere else to live. Now your choice is Oscar, isn't it? You chose him over your husband. Maybe it will work out for you. Though under his breath, he muttered, "Not that I believe it will." As it turned out, Patricia's parents had been paying her legal fees all this time. With no other choice, she signed the papers, and Garcia swiftly disappeared from our lives. I had nothing to do with his sudden disappearance. 2 months later, I was officially divorced. It happened last night. Tonight, the Jones sisters promised to cheer me up, and tomorrow they'll be back again. I have to admit, life doesn't seem so bad anymore. Patricia lived with her parents for a while, but they eventually told her she had to live on her own and move forward. For a long time, Patricia couldn't find a job and bounced between staying with different friends until she eventually got involved in escort work. Yes, it sounds strange, but she did it. Maybe it's her calling. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.